Every single day, over 4 billion people lose the same battle, the battle against lust. It's silent, invisible, and worse than any addiction known to man. It rewires your brain, drains your focus, and convinces you that pleasure is freedom. But in reality, it's the strongest chain ever created. If you can't control it, it controls you. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Yet most men today have surrendered that power, not to an external enemy, but to their own undisciplined desire. This isn't about denying your nature, it's about mastering it. Because if you cannot control your lust will control your life. Part 1. Understanding the enemy within. To defeat an enemy, you must first understand it. Lust isn't evil by nature. It's energy, raw, powerful, and neutral. What makes it destructive is misdirection. The Stoics taught that every impulse has a purpose, but when the mind becomes a servant to impulse instead of its commander, chaos begins. Lust, unchecked, becomes the ultimate distraction. It consumes mental clarity, dissolves discipline, and drains the drive that could have built empires, written books, or conquered fears. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." That's exactly what lust does. It hijacks imagination, paints illusions of satisfaction, and traps you in the endless cycle of craving what you'll never truly possess. Look at history. The fall of kings, warriors, and philosophers often came not from the battlefield, but from the inability to govern themselves. Lust clouds judgment, and a man who cannot see clearly cannot lead, create, or grow. The Stoics believed that reason, logos, is what separates man from beast. Lust tries to erase that line. It whispers that indulgence is freedom, that pleasure is peace, that control is repression. But this is the grand deception. Real freedom isn't doing whatever you want, it's having the power to say no to what weakens you. Modern society thrives on distraction. Every scroll, every click, every advertisement is designed to stimulate desire and hijack attention. We live in an age where instant gratification is currency, and patience, the essence of Stoic virtue, is treated like poverty. The man who seeks mastery must recognize this. The more you feed your lower desires, the weaker your higher self becomes. Lust isn't just a moral trap, it's an attention trap. Every second lost in fantasy is a second stolen from your focus, your mission, your purpose. The Stoics viewed self-control as one of the cardinal virtues, the very foundation of character. They didn't reject desire entirely, they sought to rule over it. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." To master lust, then, is to reclaim sovereignty over your mind. This begins not with suppression, but with awareness. When the urge rises, observe it. Don't judge it, don't obey it, watch it. See it as energy, as movement within the mind. It is not you, it is a thought, a passing impulse. The Stoic way is not to fight emotion blindly, but to detach from its control. Self-mastery over lust requires understanding the mechanism behind it. Lust thrives on novelty and fantasy. The anticipation, not the act itself, creates the addictive loop. It manipulates the brain to seek more stimulation, more dopamine, more illusion. The Stoics would say that such desire belongs to the external, things outside your control. What you can control is your judgment, how you perceive, how you respond, how you assign value. Once you realize that lustful thoughts hold no real value unless you grant it, the illusion collapses, the power returns to you. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "If it is endurable, then endure it. Stop complaining." The same applies to desire. It's endurable. Every craving feels like a storm, but it passes. The more you endure without surrender, the stronger you become. Each moment of restraint compounds like interest, small victories that transform your willpower into steel. What once controlled you begins to lose its hold. What once distracted you becomes powerless. But understand this: suppression without direction leads to frustration. The Stoic path isn't about killing desire, but redirecting it. The energy that fuels lust is the same energy that fuels creation, focus, and purpose. When you control it, you can transform it. The drive that once pushed you towards weakness can be forged into ambition. The same mind that fantasizes can visualize progress. This is what the Stoics meant by transmutation, turning passion into purpose. Imagine your desire is fire. Uncontrolled, it burns everything. Controlled, it warms, cooks, and forges steel. Lust is that fire, and you are the blacksmith. If you let it rage wild, it consumes your mind. But if you learn to channel it through work, art, discipline, and mastery, you can turn the most dangerous impulse into your greatest weapon. Every great Stoic practiced voluntary discomfort, fasting, simplicity, abstinence, not because they hated pleasure, but because they refused to be its slaves. When you deliberately choose restraint, you regain power. Each act of control teaches your mind that pleasure is not the master, you are. The more you train this muscle of self-restraint, the more unshakable your will becomes. The real reward of conquering lust isn't purity, it's clarity. When you stop chasing fleeting stimulation, your mind quiets. You begin to see your life as it is, your ambitions, your goals, your fears, without distortion. Clarity breeds power. Focus becomes razor sharp. You think clearer, act faster, live cleaner. Lust clouds judgment. Control clears it. To live stoically is to live with purpose. Every act, every choice, every thought is guided by reason and directed towards excellence. Lust, by contrast, scatters energy, leaving you fragmented and restless. The Stoic man consolidates that energy. He becomes still, sharp, and dangerous in his calm. He no longer reacts to impulses, he commands them. When the modern world tells you to follow your urges, the Stoic says, question them. When the crowd tells you to live freely, the Stoic says, true freedom is control. And when weakness whispers, you deserve it, the Stoic responds, I deserve peace, not poison. And that's the shift, from indulgence to intention, from being controlled by emotion to controlling it. The war against lust isn't moral, it's mental. Every time you resist, you train your will. Every time you delay gratification, you strengthen your character. Every moment of restraint adds weight to your resolve. You become calm in chaos, disciplined in temptation, and powerful in silence. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about perfection. It's about power. Power over the self. Power over emotion. Power over impulse. The Stoic man does not run from desire. He tames it. And in doing so, he reclaims what most men have lost: the ability to control their own mind. Every day, billions wake up already enslaved, not by governments, not by tyrants, not even by the economy, but by their own mind's hidden cravings. Lust is not just an urge, it's an invisible puppeteer. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't command, it tempts. It makes you believe you're free, while it quietly decides how you think, what you chase, and who you become. You think you're scrolling for fun. You think you're just watching for a few minutes. But behind every click, every fantasy, every private indulgence, something is programming you. And here's the Stoic truth that most people are too afraid to face. You cannot be a free man if you are a slave to your desires. Epictetus said it bluntly, no man is free who is not master of himself. The Stoics didn't say lust is evil. They said enslavement to it is. Because when lust controls you, it's not just stealing your attention. It's stealing your willpower, your focus, and your time, the three currencies that make or destroy greatness. You see, modern people confuse freedom with permission. They think doing whatever feels good is being free.
But the Stoics saw it differently. Freedom is self-control, not self-indulgence. The man who follows every impulse is not free. He's a puppet of chemicals. And lust is the most addictive of those chemicals because it hijacks the very system nature designed for creation and turns it into destruction. Ancient philosophers didn't have social media or endless dopamine loops, but they faced the same battle internally. Seneca wrote that the greatest empire is to be emperor of yourself. That means ruling over your mind like a disciplined king, not letting it turn into a chaotic democracy where every desire gets a vote. Let's break it down brutally. Lust is not just sexual desire. It's the craving to consume without consequence. It's the part of you that says, I want to feel something now, and I don't care what it costs later. It's the same energy that drives to binging, to scroll endlessly, to chase validation. Lust is the same pattern, the hunger for more, the refusal to sit with discomfort, the desperate avoidance of stillness. Stoics saw this clearly. Every desire that dominates you becomes your master. Marcus Aurelius didn't say avoid pleasure, he said control it. Because the Stoic knew the moment you depend on something to feel alive, you've given away your power to it. Think about this. When you indulge in lust repeatedly, you're not satisfying the desire, you're strengthening it. The more you feed it, the hungrier it gets. The momentary satisfaction is an illusion, a trap that tricks you into thinking you've won when you've just lost another inch of your freedom. You don't realize it, but the more you indulge, the more your brain starts craving the chase, not the act. The anticipation becomes the addiction. Stoics understood this mechanism centuries ago without neuroscience. They knew that attachment is suffering, that anything which owns your attention owns your mind. Let's step into the Stoic lens for a moment. Imagine you're a general and your mind is your army. Lust is like a spy infiltrating your ranks, whispering false comfort, promising you victory while weakening your defenses. Every time you give in, it learns more about your weakness. Every time you resist, you reclaim ground. The war isn't against lust itself, it's against dependence. Because Stoicism isn't about suppression, it's about transformation. It's not don't feel desire, it's don't be ruled by it. Here's a unique perspective most people miss. Lust isn't just physical, it's spiritual laziness. It's the mind's refusal to deal with emptiness, to face silence, to sit with boredom. You don't crave pleasure, you crave distraction from yourself. You fear stillness because it exposes how undisciplined you really are. And Stoicism says that's where your power lies, in facing that silence, in sitting still while every part of you screams to escape. Marcus called it the inner citadel. It's a fortress within you that no desire can touch, but to reach it, you must walk through discomfort. That's why the Stoics practiced voluntary hardship, fasting, cold exposure, abstinence, not because they were masochists, but because they knew the mind must be trained like a muscle. The harder the training, the stronger the control. When you stop obeying lust, something strange happens. At first, your mind rebels. It feels restless, anxious, irritated. But slowly the fog lifts. You start noticing how clear your thoughts become. Your energy stops leaking. You walk differently, calmer, more grounded, more focused. Because every time you deny lust, you're not losing pleasure, you're gaining power. The energy that once fed distraction starts feeding creation. The Stoics believed that your vital force, your essence, must be guarded like gold. If you waste it on empty pleasures, your mind weakens. But if you channel it into discipline, you become magnetic. People can feel it even without words, a quiet authority, an energy that says, I'm not easily moved. Lust thrives in secrecy and shame. Stoicism kills it with awareness and clarity. When you can name what's happening inside you, when you can see the pattern as it's unfolding, you break the illusion. The next time the craving hits, don't fight it with guilt. Observe it. Watch how it rises, peaks, and fades. That's what Marcus Aurelius did with his emotions. He didn't suppress them, he studied them. He wrote in his journal, dissecting every impulse until it lost power. You can do the same. When you observe lust, you stop identifying with it. You become the watcher, not the puppet. And that's where real freedom begins. Here's another Stoic truth. Nature designed desire to serve you, not destroy you. Lust becomes destructive only when it's misdirected. If you can channel that same intensity into purpose, into your work, your mission, your physical training, it transforms from chaos into drive. That's why the Stoics saw discipline as sacred. It's how you transmute lower desires into higher strength. Energy is neutral. It's your direction that defines it. The man who wastes his energy chasing pleasure becomes hollow. The man who masters it becomes unstoppable. But here's the paradox. The more you chase freedom through pleasure, the more you lose it. The more you pursue mastery through discipline, the more pleasure you eventually experience. Deeper, purer, more lasting. Because it's no longer stolen from weakness. It's earned through strength. The Stoic doesn't deny himself for punishment. He does it to taste a freedom most people will never know. Seneca once said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Lust is the most efficient time thief ever created. It convinces you to trade your golden hours for moments of nothingness. And when you add up those moments, they form years. Years you could have built something, learned something, become someone extraordinary. Every minute you spend enslaved to lust is a minute stolen from your potential. The Stoic sees this clearly and acts accordingly. He guards his time like a warrior guards his sword. He treats his attention as sacred territory, because once it's gone, it never returns. If you want to defeat lust the Stoic way, don't fight the desire. Master the direction. You cannot kill an instinct. You can only rewire its purpose. The same energy that drives lust is the same fire that drives creativity, ambition, and achievement. The difference lies in where you aim it. A distracted man burns out. A disciplined man burns bright. When you rise above lust, you don't become dull. You become sharper, more intense, more alive. Because true vitality comes from control, not chaos. Think about this every time temptation hits. The short-term version of you wants comfort. The long-term version of you wants greatness. Every time you choose control, you align with the future version of yourself that already won this war. That's the Stoic mindset, to act today as if the man you want to become is already watching you. Because he is. So when you feel that pull, when the urge hits hard, remember this. Lust isn't a monster outside of you. It's a shadow inside you. You can't outrun it. You can only outshine it. The Stoics didn't defeat their impulses by hiding from them. They stood face to face, unflinching, and said, "You have no power over me." That's how you win, not once, but every single day. Because mastery is not built in a single victory. It's built in quiet, invisible battles, fought in your mind when no one's watching. Every time you resist, you rise. Every time you say no, you train your soul to obey your higher self. That's Stoicism in its rawest form, not emotionless detachment, but powerful restraint, the ability to desire and yet remain unmoved, to feel the fire but not let it burn your house down. Lust will always exist, but you must decide. Will it control you or will it forge you? Part 3. Deep Rewiring the Mind. The Stoics' blueprint to break desire's code. Lust doesn't die from avoidance. It dies from understanding. You can't escape something that lives in your thoughts. You can only reprogram it. The problem with modern people isn't that they feel lust. It's that they've let it colonize their brains. They've built mental highways of craving, deep neural grooves carved by repetition and weakness. Every time you give in, that groove deepens, and the impulse finds its path faster. The Stoics didn't use words like dopamine or neural rewiring, but they mastered the process intuitively. Their training wasn't about religion or repression. It was about neuroplasticity through discipline. They knew your habits sculpt your brain, and your brain dictates your fate. Marcus Aurelius trained his mind like a soldier through repeated reminders, rational counterattacks, and cold exposure to discomfort. He'd write, "When you feel a temptation, remind yourself what it really is." That's the Stoic trick. Exposure plus perspective. You don't run from the desire, you dissect it. You strip away its illusion until it becomes absurd. When you see lust as it is, a fleeting chemical surge tricking you into wasting your life energy, its power fades. This is step 1 of Stoic rewiring, deconstruction. Here's how to do it in practice. The next time the urge strikes, don't instantly react. Freeze it. Name it. Say to yourself, "This is not me. This is a signal, a biological whisper trying to hijack my attention." Then visualize it like smoke, real but fleeting. The Stoics were masters of detachment through visualization. Epictetus taught that you should see things as they are, not as you imagine them. When you look at lust through this detached lens, you realize how ridiculous it is. A few pixels, a few moments of dopamine, and in return you trade energy, time, self-respect, and clarity. Once you see that imbalance clearly, the illusion cracks. That's how you begin the mental rewiring, not by force, but by clarity. But clarity alone isn't enough. The Stoics also knew that the mind cannot exist in a vacuum. If you remove one obsession, it will find another. So you must replace the act of indulgence with an act of intention. That's why they practiced redirection. Marcus would write that every passion must be brought back to reason, meaning turned toward a higher purpose. The same fire that fuels lust can fuel your ambition, your creativity, your hunger to build something that lasts. Instead of suppressing it, use it. Every time you feel the pull, don't resist, redirect. Go train, go write, go build, go learn. Convert that restless energy into momentum. Lust is energy misdirected, but energy nonetheless. The Stoic uses it as fuel, not fire. Here's the modern misunderstanding. People think discipline means fighting impulses forever. But true Stoic mastery isn't constant resistance, it's transmutation. When you repeatedly redirect the same energy, your brain rewires. The circuits that once triggered craving start triggering creation. Slowly, your identity shifts from the man who chases pleasure to the man who builds purpose. The ancient Stoics used reason to do this. Today we can do it with habit systems. Your environment, routine, and exposure must align with your highest self. Epictetus said, "If you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Translation, change your inputs even if people mock you for it. Unfollow the accounts that feed your weakness. Leave conversations that feed lustful thinking. Rebuild your world to match your goals. A Stoic doesn't try to be stronger than his environment, he engineers it. Because willpower alone is fragile, systems are bulletproof. Think of your attention as water. Wherever you pour it, that thing grows. For most people, lust thrives because their attention leaks in 1,000 directions. Every glance, every scroll, every fantasy feeds it. The Stoic learns to guard attention like treasure. He practices presence like a weapon. Marcus Aurelius wrote, You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. You can't control urges appearing, but you can control where your focus lands after they appear. Focus is the sword that cuts through temptation. Now there's another dimension people rarely address: the body. Stoicism wasn't just philosophy, it was physical. They trained their bodies through endurance, cold, fasting, and control because they knew the body feeds the mind. A weak, sluggish, overstimulated body produces a foggy, impulsive mind. When you start treating your body as sacred through training, breath, cold, or fasting, you drain the energy source that lust feeds on. Every cold shower, every rep, every hour of discipline tells your body, "I am the master, not you." That command echoes in your brain until it becomes your natural state. But there's even a deeper rewiring, one that happens at the level of your self-image. The Stoics believed in living according to nature. That doesn't mean primitive instincts. It means living in harmony with your rational soul, the part that seeks order, not chaos. Lust thrives in contradiction. It whispers, "This one time doesn't matter." But the Stoic asks, does this align with who I'm becoming? When your standards become sacred, temptation loses its voice. You don't avoid weakness because it's bad. You avoid it because it doesn't fit your identity. And here's the paradox that only the Stoic understands. When you no longer fight lust out of guilt, but out of self-respect, you transcend it. You don't walk around feeling deprived. You walk around feeling powerful. Because now, every time you say no, you're not suppressing a desire. You're proving your dominance over it. Each victory, however small, rewires your sense of control. The reward is not comfort, it's confidence. Let's go deeper. The Stoic rewiring is based on a principle I call the triad of mastery: awareness, direction, and detachment. Awareness means noticing your impulses the moment they arise. Direction means consciously channeling them towards something higher. Detachment is the final evolution. You no longer even need to redirect because the craving no longer defines you. You see it rise, smile at it, and it fades. This is where the Stoic becomes unbeatable. The modern man wastes hours fighting his urges. The Stoic spends none because he's built a mind that doesn't negotiate. He doesn't debate lust, he dismisses it. Now, understand this: lust will never vanish completely. It's part of your biology. But what can vanish is your reaction to it. The Stoic's goal isn't suppression, it's sovereignty. Lust may knock, but it finds no entry. You recognize it as part of nature, not a command. The difference is subtle but powerful. One mindset says, "I must fight this." The other says, "I simply won't serve this." Every time you practice this, your brain rewires. Not metaphorically, but literally. Neural pathways weaken from disuse and strengthen from repetition. Every no is a rep of mental strength. Every moment of stillness in the face of craving is a rewiring pulse. Over weeks, you start noticing something astonishing. You crave your purpose more than your pleasure. You feel more energy, more mental clarity, more grounded calm. Your life stops revolving around gratification and starts orbiting around greatness. That's the Stoic secret. Discipline is not deprivation, it's transformation. You don't lose anything, you evolve. And while everyone else keeps feeding their impulses, wondering why they feel empty, you're slowly becoming untouchable, focused, centered, and fully alive. The Stoics knew victory over desire is victory over life itself. Because once you've mastered your inner world, No temptation, no fame, no wealth, no body can control you. You become the calm eye within every storm.
Part 4. The Relapse Illusion. How Stoics Turned Weakness into Wisdom. Every man who sets out to conquer his desires eventually falls. That's the first truth you must accept. Even Marcus Aurelius, the Emperor of Rome, and perhaps the most disciplined man in history, wrote about his struggles, not with lust specifically, but with distraction, irritation, and temptation. Because discipline is not a straight line, it's a spiral. You ascend through your failures. The weak see relapse as proof they are broken. The Stoic sees it as proof there's still work to do. This difference in perspective is everything. The ordinary man falls and says, "I'm finished." The Stoic falls and says, "Good, another test." That's the Stoic's psychological jujitsu, turning what defeats others into training for himself. When you relapse, whether that means giving in to lust, distraction, or comfort, your first instinct is shame. Shame is the mind's way of punishing itself for failure, but Stoicism rejects that. Shame is self-pity disguised as virtue. It keeps you stuck in the loop of indulgence and guilt. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you fall short, return to yourself and resume the journey." That's the entire recovery model of Stoicism. You don't spiral, you reset. The Stoic doesn't indulge shame, he studies it. He asks, "Why did I fall? What led me there? What pattern am I repeating?" Instead of emotion, he brings reason, because emotion will make you repeat the same sin. Reason will set you free from it. Think of relapse like a compass correction. Each failure reveals where your system is weak. You didn't fail because you're powerless. You failed because there's a gap between your ideals and your structure. Maybe your environment is too tempting. Maybe your energy is too scattered. Maybe your vision has gone blurry. The Stoic looks at relapse as data. It tells him what needs reinforcement. The man who treats his failure as feedback never truly fails. Here's the hard truth. Lust doesn't care about your promises. It's not moved by guilt, morality, or willpower. It's a reflex built into your biology. So if you fight it with emotion, you lose. Every time you give in, it strengthens its neural circuits. Every time you resist, you weaken them. But resistance requires awareness. Most men lose the battle before it begins because they wait until they're tempted to fight. The Stoic never waits. He builds fortifications before the enemy arrives. That means living in a state of readiness, being conscious of triggers, not reactive to them. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Most people relapse because they fantasize about the pleasure long before they act. The fantasy weakens their resolve. Stoics practice premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. They imagine the consequences before the action. When temptation whispers, "It's harmless," the Stoic imagines the aftermath, the mental fog, the self-disgust, the lost time, the fractured focus. He fast-forwards through the illusion and sees the truth. That mental simulation kills the desire before it matures. The modern equivalent is visualization in reverse. When you're tempted, don't picture the pleasure. Picture the emptiness after. Picture the regret. Picture your potential slipping through your fingers. The brain follows images. Feed it the right ones. But here's where most people go wrong. They think defeating lust means living like a monk forever. That's not Stoicism.
The Stoics didn't preach denial, they preached control. They didn't suppress desire, they mastered it. The point is not to kill the fire, it's to direct it. When a Stoic fails, he doesn't say, "I shouldn't have these impulses." He says, "I must train to handle them better." He views himself as an athlete of the mind, training under resistance, not hiding from it. That's why relapse, to him, is not shameful. It's reps. Every time you fall and get up consciously, you build psychological muscle. You start to notice the triggers faster. You bounce back sooner. The fall becomes shallower. The rise becomes faster. Marcus wrote, "You become what you give your mind to." So after relapse, don't give your mind to guilt. Give it to rebuilding. The day after a fall is your most powerful day, if you use it. Because that's when your brain is most plastic, most open to change. If you flood that window with self-loathing, you reinforce weakness. If you flood it with structure, reflection, and recommitment, you rewire strength. Replace shame with system. Write down the exact moment you fell, the emotion you felt, the thought that justified it, the environment you were in. Then make one change, not 10, one. If you failed at night, remove your phone from your room. If you failed after stress, design a different coping mechanism. A walk, breath work, journaling. The Stoic doesn't try to be stronger than his habits. He outsmarts them. There's a principle the Stoics lived by, amor fati, love of fate. It means to not only accept what happens, but to use it. When you fall, love it, because it's teaching you mastery. The emotion that once crushed you now strengthens you. Imagine the power in that. Never being defeated, only refined. Every mistake becomes a step toward mastery. That's the Stoic superpower. They believed everything, even failure, could be used as fuel. Here's the paradox. The more you accept that relapse is part of the journey, the less you relapse. Because you remove the emotional chaos that feeds it. You stop making it personal. You treat lust as weather. It comes, it goes, but it doesn't define the sky. The sky is you, vast, unchanging, aware. Lust is just a passing cloud. And the less you attach to the cloud, the faster it fades. The Stoics practiced this through indifference. They'd say, if it's not in my control, it doesn't deserve my reaction. You can't control when the thought arises, but you can control whether you feed it. You can watch it, detach, and let it die from starvation. But let's go deeper. Lust, in its root, is not evil. It's the desire to connect, to create, to feel alive. The problem is misdirection. We chase imitation instead of essence. The Stoic sees through the imitation. He asks, what am I really craving? Often the answer is power, validation, purpose, connection. But lust offers none of that, only the illusion of it. The Stoic trains himself to meet his real needs directly, through creation, through service, through excellence. That's how he transcends lust, not by cutting off the desire, but by upgrading its target. When you redirect that energy, when you channel that same hunger into learning, building, training, or leading, you experience a new kind of high, self-respect. That's the cleanest dopamine hit the Stoic knows. It's not chemical, it's earned. And it's addictive in the best way. You start chasing progress instead of pleasure. You realize the thing you were looking for through lust, fulfillment, intensity, aliveness, was always waiting on the other side of discipline. This is why relapse, once understood correctly, becomes irrelevant. It's not something to fear. It's something to transcend. Because you realize you don't need to fight lust forever. Once your life becomes aligned with purpose, lust loses its grip. It's replaced by drive, by mission, by creative obsession. You no longer resist it, you outgrow it. Seneca once wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity." In that sense, lust is not your enemy, it's your gym. It's the resistance through which you train your soul. Each urge resisted is a rep of strength. Each relapse analyzed is a lesson. Each victory, no matter how small, is the forging of a man who no longer serves his impulses, but commands them.
The Stoics understood something most modern thinkers ignore. Energy is neutral. It doesn't care about morality or labels. Lust, anger, fear, or passion all are merely surges of energy coursing through your mind and body. The problem isn't the energy itself, it's how you channel it. Most people channel it into chaos, indulgence, and distraction. The Stoics, however, became alchemists of the soul. They transformed the raw energy of desire into focus, discipline, and creation. This is the essence of the energy transmutation principle, the art of turning impulses into power. Lust is, at its core, intense energy. It makes your heart race, your thoughts fixate, your body tingle. The same intensity, when directed intentionally, can drive unparalleled achievement. Marcus Aurelius didn't have Instagram or endless media to tempt him, yet he faced his own inner storms daily. What he learned, what the Stoics have always taught, is that you cannot eliminate energy, you can only transform it. Every urge is an opportunity, every craving is a signal pointing to where your vitality is focused. The man who ignores it is distracted. The man who channels it becomes unstoppable. Here's the first step of transmutation: awareness of the energy surge. You must recognize the moment the desire arises, the instant the mind starts to wander toward lustful thoughts or temptations. Most people miss this moment because it's subtle. It starts as a flicker, a fleeting curiosity, a small craving. The Stoic catches it immediately, naming it, "This is desire, not necessity." Recognition alone already diminishes its power. When you separate yourself from the impulse, you gain control over its direction. Next comes conscious redirection. The Stoic doesn't fight energy by suppression, he channels it. The same fire that burns in lust can be directed toward physical training, creative work, intellectual pursuit, or skill mastery. Imagine the surge of tension, the rapid heartbeat, the mental fixation, and instead of surrendering, you lift weights, write a page of your book, solve a problem, meditate, or plan a project. That energy, once wasted, now compounds. It builds momentum. It strengthens you. This is the essence of Stoic alchemy, turning the raw fuel of desire into productive force. Lust is a form of intensity. When misdirected, it destroys. When mastered, it elevates. The difference lies not in avoiding the feeling, but in controlling its application. Every time you successfully redirect the urge, you reinforce neural pathways of discipline. The brain learns desire doesn't always demand indulgence. It can drive creation. Over time, your entire relationship with impulses transforms. You no longer fear them, you harness them. But transmutation isn't purely physical, it's deeply psychological. The Stoics knew that craving thrives in absence of purpose.
Energy seeks an outlet. If you deny the outlet without providing an alternative, it will erupt uncontrollably. This is why philosophy alone is not enough. Habits, routines, and disciplined action are the channels through which desire is refined. The Stoics built daily rituals, waking early, journaling, exercising, fasting, meditating, that directed energy toward growth. Modern equivalents are training your body, reading, learning, creating, and producing value. The key is consistency. A single act of redirection has little effect. Repetition, however, rewires the mind over months and years. Consider this. The urge for lust often arrives with restlessness, impatience, or agitation. The mind seeks release. If you can channel that restlessness into action, you don't just suppress the impulse, you upgrade it. You transform potential weakness into an engine of productivity. Over time, you notice a subtle shift. Cravings lose their urgency. Energy that once demanded indulgence now fuels progress, creativity, and self-mastery. You start to feel more alive, not from pleasure, but from achievement. The Stoic understands that true vitality is earned through discipline, not fleeting indulgence. Another critical point: transmutation requires mental visualization. The Stoics often reflected on their goals, imagining their highest selves facing daily challenges. When desire strikes, visualize yourself using that energy to create, solve, or build. Picture the tension flowing through your body and fueling action. See your focus sharpening, your skills expanding, your mind growing clearer. The body responds to mental imagery, and by repeatedly associating energy with productive action, you create a habit loop that redirects impulses before they manifest destructively. Environment is equally crucial. Energy can be misdirected when external stimuli constantly trigger desire. The Stoics practiced voluntary isolation, limited distractions, and simplified environments to minimize triggers. Modern adaptation: remove temptations, structure your day, control your inputs, and create your digital space. Your environment must support transmutation, not resist it. The less energy wasted on resisting impulses, the more you have for mastery. Now let's address intensity. Lust is powerful because it's urgent. The Stoic harnesses urgency rather than suppressing it. When you feel the surge of craving, don't shrink, expand. Lift, run, study, write, meditate. Let the fire of desire propel you. Over time, the intensity that once enslaved you becomes the engine of your evolution. You become addicted not to indulgence, but to control, creation, and growth. The Stoics also emphasize reflection at the end of the day. Every surge of desire that you felt, resisted, or redirected becomes data. Write it down. Analyze it. Understand its triggers, its strength, and your reaction. By externalizing the inner struggle, you gain clarity. The mind learns faster when observation is combined with action. This reflection consolidates neural pathways, making transmutation more automatic with each repetition. Now realize this: transmutation is the key to freedom. Lust unchecked is a prison. Energy redirected becomes wings. The Stoic doesn't fight desire with guilt or shame. He transmutes it into mastery. The man who masters his impulses doesn't live under their shadow, he lives above them. And when you consistently practice this, you gain an inner authority that no external circumstance can shake. You are no longer reactive. You are proactive.
You are alive in a way that pleasure could never grant. Transmutation is not a one-time skill. It is a lifelong practice. It requires awareness, redirection, reflection, and environment design. It requires seeing every desire not as a temptation to resist, but as raw material for power. The Stoic doesn't fear energy, he converts it. Lust, anger, fear, all are neutral forces. How you channel them defines your life. In mastering this principle, you gain control over yourself, over your time, over your focus, over your destiny.
Now, Part 6, Environment and Habit Engineering, Building a Life that Silences Lust. The ancient Stoics knew that the battle against desire is not won in the heat of the moment. It is won long before the moment arrives. Marcus Aurelius and Seneca didn't leave their self-control to chance. They built systems and environments that shaped their impulses before the impulses even appeared. Most modern men fail not because they are weak, but because their world conspires against their discipline. Lust thrives in chaos, clutter, overstimulation, and convenience. The Stoics solved this centuries ago through deliberate design. Controlling their environment, structuring their days, and automating virtue through habits. Understanding and applying this principle is essential to defeating lust in the modern age. Think of your environment as the foundation of a fortress. No matter how strong your walls are, if the foundation is weak, the fortress will collapse. Every element in your surroundings can either reinforce or weaken your self-control. The Stoics practiced voluntary simplicity. They removed unnecessary indulgences, limited distractions, and structured their surroundings to favor discipline. Today, this translates to controlling your digital inputs, curating your social media, avoiding triggering content, and designing a physical space that promotes focus rather than indulgence. Your phone, your room, your schedule, and even the people you interact with can either feed lust or starve it. Control these variables and desire becomes far less potent because it is starved of constant triggers. Habits act as autopilot systems for self-control. The Stoics knew the mind is lazy by nature and will often default to indulgence if left unstructured. The solution? Create routines that make virtuous action automatic and indulgence inconvenient. Start your day with a structured morning ritual, meditation, journaling, exercise, activities that prime your mind and body for discipline. Fill your day with purpose-driven tasks that leave little mental bandwidth for wandering desire. The more predictable your environment and schedule, the less room lust has to infiltrate your consciousness. Structure is freedom, not restriction. It removes the cognitive load of constant decision-making, turning your life into a vehicle for progress rather than distraction. The Stoics also practiced what we would now call environmental pre-commitment. They removed temptation before it ever reached their conscious mind. If something had the power to weaken their resolve, they eliminated it entirely. Epictetus advised that the wise man doesn't test his will against endless temptations. He avoids unnecessary confrontation. For example, if a modern man struggles with digital lust, he installs filters, removes certain apps, or limits his internet access during vulnerable hours. He doesn't rely solely on willpower in the moment. He structures his environment to support his higher self. This is not weakness, it is strategic mastery. The Stoic doesn't fight battles on unfavorable terrain, he changes the terrain. Another layer of environmental engineering is energy management. Lust often strikes strongest when energy is low, after fatigue, boredom, or overstimulation. The Stoics recognized that physical and mental energy are finite resources. They used exercise, fasting, medication, and structured rest to maintain clarity and vitality. Today, you must do the same. A tired mind is a weak mind. A fatigued body is a vulnerable body.
The stronger your energy baseline, the less seductive desire becomes. When your day is carefully designed to optimize sleep, nutrition, movement, and focus, temptation loses its grip because you no longer operate from scarcity or weakness. The principle of substitution is also key. The Stoics didn't simply remove desire, they replaced it. Where desire once consumed their attention, they inserted higher purpose, philosophical study, creation, mentorship, civic duty, or personal excellence. Modern equivalents, learning a skill, creating content, working on a business, physical training, or meaningful social contribution. Redirecting the urge toward a worthy alternative not only diminishes its power, but also strengthens your identity. Every successful substitution reinforces a new neural pathway. Energy formerly wasted on indulgence now compounds into growth. This is habit engineering in action. Accountability is another pillar of Stoic environmental design. Ancient philosophers often maintained journals, wrote letters, or engaged with mentors to monitor their progress. This externalizes the inner struggle, creating pressure to align behavior with higher ideals. Today, digital or physical journaling, accountability partners, or tracking systems serve the same purpose. When you track your actions consistently, you can see patterns, identify vulnerabilities, and make iterative improvements. Lust thrives in secrecy. Accountability shines light into hidden corners and diminishes its power. But here's a nuance many miss. Environment and habits don't remove desire, they transform your relationship with it. When you engineer your environment and your daily systems, you don't fight desire every second. You make it inconvenient to the point that your default response becomes restraint. Over time, your environment and routines cultivate identity. You no longer rely solely on willpower because your life itself is structured around virtue. The Stoic's body, mind, and surroundings align with his principles so perfectly that indulgence becomes unnatural, uncomfortable, and unattractive. Let's apply this to a real-world scenario. Suppose you are addicted to mindless scrolling or visual triggers of lust. You wake up fatigued and immediately grab your phone, feeding desire before your day begins. A Stoic approach would involve multiple layers, leaving the phone outside your bedroom, having a morning ritual that includes meditation and exercise, structuring your day around meaningful tasks, using website blockers, journaling reflections, and intentionally redirecting any arising impulses into creation or learning. Every layer compounds, creating a protective architecture around your self-control. This is the power of systemic engineering. It externalizes discipline. Instead of fighting desire alone, you've built an environment, routines, and triggers that naturally weaken it. Desire still exists, but it loses the element of surprise, the edge of temptation, and the dominance over your attention. The Stoic's battle becomes almost effortless because he fights from a position of overwhelming advantage. Finally, remember that the ultimate goal of environmental and habit engineering is identity reinforcement. Every action you take in alignment with your values strengthens the version of yourself who cannot be seduced by momentary cravings. Lust is no longer a battle. It is a test that you pass automatically because your life itself is structured around virtue. The Stoic doesn't just avoid weakness, he becomes strong by creating a life that naturally cultivates strength. In essence, the modern application of Stoic principles to defeating lust is multi-layered. Control your inputs, structure your routines, manage energy, substitute higher purpose, and enforce accountability. The combination forms a fortress around your attention, willpower, and identity. Lust will still knock, but the fortress ensures it cannot enter. Your daily life becomes a training ground, every choice a rep in mental, physical, and spiritual discipline. Through environment and habit engineering, you turn the abstract principles of Stoicism into concrete, automatic defense systems, ensuring that desire no longer dictates your behavior, but instead becomes a neutral force that can be channeled, managed, and even leveraged for growth.
Part 7. Emotional resilience, building the inner citadel against lust. In the Stoic framework, true mastery over lust is not achieved solely through willpower, habit, or environmental control. It is achieved by cultivating an unshakable inner citadel. Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus repeatedly emphasized that the mind is the ultimate battlefield. If the mind is fortified, no external or internal temptation can conquer it. Lust, like all impulses, is essentially a test of emotional resilience. It thrives in weakness, in distraction, in the gaps between thought and action. The Stoics understood that to defeat desire permanently, one must develop a psychological armor that allows one to feel impulses without being compelled to act on them. This is the foundation of building an unmovable inner citadel. The first step in constructing this citadel is recognition and detachment. Lust, at its core, is a natural physiological reaction, a surge of chemicals and impulses designed to elicit attention and action. The weak mistake this reaction for an identity trait. I am lustful, I must indulge. The Stoic, however, sees lust as external to the self, a transient visitor in the mind's landscape. By consistently observing impulses as separate from your rational self, you cultivate emotional distance. The practice is simple in concept but profound in effect. When the craving arises, label it without judgment. This is an urge, nothing more. That labeling shifts the experience from reactive to observational, immediately reducing its power over behavior. Next is the development of anticipatory resilience. Premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils, is a Stoic technique used to mentally simulate challenges before they arise. In the context of lust, this means anticipating triggers and visualizing both the temptation and the disciplined response. Instead of waiting for desire to strike, you imagine it rising and practice mentally redirecting it toward reason and purpose. This repeated visualization strengthens neural pathways that reinforce control and reduces emotional reactivity when real-world situations occur. Essentially, you rehearse resistance until it becomes instinctive, transforming the mind into a citadel where lust finds no entry. Emotional resilience also demands the cultivation of perspective. The Stoics repeatedly reminded themselves of the impermanence of all things, including bodily impulses. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Think of yourself as dead. You have lived your life. Now take what's left and live it properly." Applying this mindset to lust, the impulse is seen not as a commanding force, but as a fleeting, meaningless sensation. Once viewed through this lens, desire loses its urgency and seductiveness. The power lies not in suppressing lust, but in realizing its transitory nature, understanding that indulgence is a temporary distraction, and that clarity of purpose is permanent. Another pillar of resilience is self-mastery through discomfort. The Stoics frequently expose themselves to challenges, whether fasting, enduring cold, or enduring fatigue. These practices were not arbitrary. They trained the mind to remain composed under stress. Lust is a form of stress, an internal discomfort that demands immediate gratification. By regularly subjecting oneself to controlled discomfort, one strengthens the ability to remain steady under impulses. Each instance of resisting small discomfort builds emotional fortitude, which compounds into unshakable resilience over time. Reflection and journaling are critical components of the Stoic inner citadel. Daily introspection allows you to observe moments of weakness and moments of triumph, extracting lessons from each encounter with desire.
Writing down the triggers, the responses, and the outcomes externalizes internal struggle and converts fleeting experiences into lasting insight. Over time, journaling trains the mind to preemptively recognize patterns and respond with wisdom instead of reaction. This creates a feedback loop where resilience grows exponentially. Additionally, one must integrate the Stoic principle of aligning desires with nature and reason. Lust, in its unbridled form, is a misalignment, an instinct seeking satisfaction in the wrong channels. The Stoic aligns his desires with rational purpose. Energy once devoted to fleeting pleasure is redirected toward growth, mastery, and contribution. Emotional resilience is not merely resisting desire, it is reconfiguring the target of desire toward higher objectives. When your values are consistently reinforced through reflection, action, and discipline, the mind develops a natural immunity to impulses that do not serve long-term goals. A critical insight of Stoic resilience is learning to endure temptation without moralizing it. Most people react to lust with shame, guilt, or self-loathing, which paradoxically strengthens its hold by making the mind vulnerable to cycles of indulgence and regret. The Stoic avoids this trap by practicing indifference, not detachment from morality, but detachment from emotional overreaction. The craving exists. It is neither good nor bad in itself. What matters is the rational response. By maintaining equanimity in the face of impulse, the mind builds a fortress where lust is observed, neutralized, and rendered powerless. Stoics also emphasize patience as a form of resilience. Lust often demands instant gratification, preying on impatience. By cultivating patience, the mind learns to endure the tension of desire without succumbing. Techniques like delayed response, controlled breathing, meditation, or focused activity strengthen the ability to endure the urge without acting on it. Every moment of patience is a brick in the citadel, solidifying control and creating long-term stability. Finally, the highest form of emotional resilience is identity reinforcement. The Stoic doesn't only resist lust, he becomes someone for whom indulgence is unnatural. Through repeated practice, reflection, habit engineering, and mindful exposure, the mind internalizes the identity of self-mastery. Desire still arises, but it no longer defines or compels action. The Stoic lives from principle, purpose, and reason, and his inner citadel becomes impenetrable. Lust is no longer a battlefield because the soldier has trained beyond the need for battle. He has become the fort itself. Through this systematic cultivation of awareness, premeditation, perspective, controlled discomfort, reflection, alignment with reason, emotional indifference, patience, and identity reinforcement, the Stoic constructs a mind that is both flexible and unbreakable, a citadel where desire can knock but never enter. Every impulse is met with observation, every temptation with redirection, every weakness with learning. Over time, this emotional resilience transforms the individual from reactive to proactive, from vulnerable to sovereign, from a servant of fleeting impulses to the master of enduring purpose.
The battle against lust is never fought in isolation. The Stoics understood that humans are social creatures, and society itself is saturated with triggers that can weaken resolve. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about the necessity of remaining steadfast amidst the chaos of other people's impulses and expectations. Lust is amplified when unchecked environments, peer influence, and social pressures feed it. To master desire, one must not only train the mind internally, but also navigate the external world strategically, designing interactions and relationships that support discipline rather than undermine it. First, recognize that external stimuli are unavoidable. Modern society bombards every sense with sexualized imagery, attention-seeking behaviors, and instant gratification opportunities. The casual scroll through social media, conversations in certain social circles, or exposure to provocative entertainment can all act as triggers. The Stoics approached this with the mindset of choice. While one cannot always control external events, one can control reactions. They maintained inner freedom by mentally categorizing these stimuli as indifferent, neither inherently good nor bad. This detachment allows impulses to be observed and processed rationally rather than reacted to impulsively. Next, deliberate association is crucial. The people you surround yourself with shape a mind far more than abstract philosophy alone. Stoics consciously associated with those who reinforced virtue, self-discipline, and rational thought. In modern application, this means limiting time with individuals who indulge recklessly, disrespect boundaries, or normalize weakness. Simultaneously, seek mentorship, accountability partners, or communities that encourage growth, focus, and self-mastery. Desire thrives in environments where indulgence is normalized. It diminishes where discipline is admired and practiced. The social environment becomes a mirror, reflecting and amplifying internal strength. Communication and transparency are another layer of defense. Epictetus suggested that explaining one's principles openly strengthens commitment. By articulating your values and boundaries, both to yourself and to trusted peers, you reinforce them cognitively and socially. When your identity as someone who masters desire is externalized, it gains weight. It is harder to act in contradiction to what has been expressed, creating an additional layer of accountability beyond private thought. Moreover, the Stoics practiced what can be called anticipatory distancing. They avoided environments and situations that disproportionately amplified temptation. This is not avoidance born of fear, but strategic positioning, understanding that energy and focus are finite and that certain social contexts may unfairly tax them. For instance, if parties, online spaces, or particular groups consistently trigger lustful impulses, a rational strategy is temporary distancing, creating room for recovery and strengthening before exposure. This is a proactive approach rather than reactive, preserving the integrity of the inner citadel built through emotional resilience. The Stoics also emphasize the importance of purpose-driven interactions. They believe that relationships, whether social, professional, or romantic, should serve higher objectives aligned with virtue and reason. Interpersonal dynamics that foster dependency, indulgence, or distraction are to be minimized. Instead, interactions that encourage reflection, growth, and accountability are amplified. In modern practice, this translates to fostering friendships that challenge intellectually, encourage disciplined habits, and reduce exposure to temptation, while romantic relationships are approached with intentionality, self-awareness, and mutual respect rather than impulsive desire. Understanding social psychology is part of this mastery. Lust often intensifies when it is shared, mirrored, or validated by others. Peer reinforcement can magnify desire, making it feel urgent or inevitable. The Stoics anticipated this amplification and relied on inner standards rather than external validation. By grounding self-worth in principle rather than pleasure or approval, desire loses the social reinforcement that typically strengthens it. The ability to remain unmoved in social settings is the hallmark of mastery. When others indulge, you observe, remain detached, and continue operating from principle. Resilience in social contexts involves preparation. The Stoics mentally rehearsed challenges, conversations, interactions, and encounters that could trigger impulsive reactions. By anticipating these scenarios and planning responses aligned with rational self-interest, they reduced emotional reactivity and more consistent alignment with long-term goals. An essential Stoic strategy is balancing detachment with connection. Complete isolation is neither feasible nor virtuous. Humans need social engagement. However, the Stoic distinguishes between engagement that supports growth and engagement that fuels weakness. Every social interaction becomes a conscious decision. Will this encounter strengthen my discipline or weaken it? Will it advance purpose or feed distraction? By applying deliberate attention to social choice, one transforms external pressures from obstacles into instruments of refinement. Lastly, the Stoic integrates reflection after social exposure. Each interaction, each temptation encountered is analyzed with clarity and honesty. Questions are asked. What influenced my impulses? Did I act according to principle? What environmental or social elements can be adjusted to reinforce mastery? This iterative process ensures continuous improvement, turning the external world, often hostile to discipline, into a dynamic training ground. Social dynamics no longer threaten mastery. They become the arena in which self-control is honed and perfected. In this way, mastery over lust extends beyond private struggle into the social sphere, transforming every interaction into a deliberate exercise in discipline, awareness, and principled living.
Part 9. Long-term reinforcement. Compounding mastery over lust. Stoicism teaches that mastery over lust is not an event but a process, a gradual, deliberate cultivation of the mind and body over time. While habits, environmental engineering, and emotional resilience provide immediate tools, long-term reinforcement ensures that the gains are permanent, not fleeting. The Stoics understood that human impulses are persistent, and without consistent reinforcement, even the strongest resolve can erode. Therefore, they approached mastery as a lifelong practice, leveraging daily victories, iterative reflection, and compounding improvements to solidify control over desire. This long-term perspective transforms occasional restraint into permanent transformation. The first principle of long-term reinforcement is consistency. Small, disciplined actions repeated daily compound into extraordinary internal strength. Each moment of restraint is a reinforcement of neural pathways that encode self-mastery. Marcus Aurelius emphasized the power of repeated effort over time, writing, "Don't let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same reason and virtue with which you meet the present." In practical terms, this means resisting desire consistently, even when the stakes are low or the temptation seems insignificant. Each act of discipline, no matter how small, reinforces identity and builds momentum toward automatic control. Iteration and reflection form the second pillar. The Stoics kept journals, noting victories, failures, triggers, and patterns of thought. This externalization converts ephemeral experiences into tangible data that can be analyzed and improved. When a temptation is resisted, reflection reinforces the methods used. When a failure occurs, analysis identifies gaps in strategy. This iterative feedback loop is crucial. Without it, lessons are forgotten and old impulses resurface. Over months and years, consistent journaling and reflection allow mastery to evolve beyond conscious effort, becoming a deeply ingrained part of identity.
A third aspect is the reinforcement of values and purpose. Lust loses its power when it is consistently contrasted with higher objectives. Every decision to redirect energy from fleeting pleasure toward creation, achievement, or self-improvement strengthens the association between desire and meaningful action. The Stoics continuously revisited their principles, aligning daily behavior with long-term goals. By regularly reminding themselves of the purpose behind restraint, they embedded the choice to master desire within the context of identity, not mere willpower. Over time, this creates a self-sustaining cycle. The mind naturally gravitates toward disciplined behavior because it aligns with the internalized sense of self. Habitual reinforcement is the next layer. The Stoics engineered daily routines so that virtuous behavior became automatic. Modern applications include structured schedules that allocate energy to learning, work, exercise, and meaningful relationships, leaving minimal opportunity for indulgence. Habits become the scaffolding upon which mastery is built. When restraint is embedded within routine, it requires less cognitive effort, reducing the likelihood of lapses caused by decision fatigue. In essence, the Stoic uses habit to create inertia in favor of discipline. Once set in motion, it is easier to maintain than to resist. Mentorship and accountability also provide long-term reinforcement. The Stoics valued dialogue with peers and teachers who could challenge, observe, and guide their progress. In the modern world, accountability partners, coaches, or communities serve this role. Regular check-ins, honest feedback, and shared principles prevent isolation, offer perspective, and reinforce commitment. This external reinforcement complements internal discipline, creating a dual-layered system of support that magnifies long-term control. Resilience to setbacks is another critical component. Even the most disciplined individuals experience lapses. The Stoics reframed failures as opportunities for growth rather than evidence of weakness. Seneca wrote, "Every man is liable to fail. It is the recovery that proves the character." When lust is indulged, reflection and corrective action transform the experience into training. The Stoic doesn't internalize guilt, he extracts data, strengthens strategies, and recommits. This approach prevents single failures from derailing long-term progress, ensuring that mastery compounds rather than collapses under pressure. Long-term reinforcement also involves visualization and mental rehearsal. The Stoics often envision themselves facing challenges with unwavering composure. In the context of lust, this includes imagining potential temptations and rehearsing disciplined responses. Over time, mental rehearsal strengthens neural patterns, creating automatic reactions aligned with virtue. By repeatedly practicing restraint and imagination, the mind becomes conditioned to act with foresight and clarity when real temptations arise, further solidifying long-term control. A crucial but often overlooked principle is self-reward and acknowledgement. Stoicism is sometimes misrepresented as austere or joyless, but the philosophy recognizes the importance of reinforcing progress. Every act of mastery, every day of consistent practice, and every moment of mindful restraint should be internally acknowledged. Recognition reinforces identity, deepens motivation, and ensures that the effort invested in discipline feels meaningful, creating positive feedback that sustains long-term engagement. The compounding effect of these strategies cannot be understated.
Every day of conscious effort, every reflection, every habit aligned with purpose, and every managed environment and every redirected surge of energy compounds over months and years. What began as conscious effort gradually becomes instinctive mastery. The individual who consistently applies these principles eventually experiences a state where lust, while still a natural impulse, no longer controls behavior. Energy is channeled into creation, focus, and higher objectives, while desire is reduced to a neutral, manageable force. This is the ultimate Stoic victory. A life where impulses are understood, managed, and harnessed, producing not only freedom from lust, but freedom to create, achieve, and live with unwavering purpose.
Part 10. Transcendence and Integration. Mastery over lust as the path to true freedom. Part 10. This is the culmination of everything we explored in the previous 9 parts: awareness, transmutation of energy, habit and environment design, emotional resilience, social navigation, and long-term reinforcement. All these strategies, when applied consistently, do more than just suppress or manage lust. They transform it into a vehicle for higher purpose, self-mastery, and ultimate freedom. The Stoics recognized that mastery over lust was not merely about abstaining from a physical or mental impulse. It was about integrating every aspect of one's life under the sovereignty of reason and principle, creating a state of being where desire no longer dominates but serves. This final part is about transcendence, where the fight against lust evolves from resistance to understanding, from control to alignment, and from discipline to liberation. At the core of transcendence is the realization that lust, like all impulses, is a force of nature, neither inherently good nor evil. Its power comes not from its intensity, but how the mind perceives it and interacts with it. The untrained mind views desire as an external master, something that must be indulged or denied in constant struggle. The Stoic mind, however, perceives lust as neutral energy, a tool, raw material, and signal. This subtle shift in perspective is profound. The fight against lust is no longer a battle against self, but a process of understanding self. Every impulse becomes a messenger, indicating areas where energy is misaligned or where purpose is unclear. Transcendence begins when lust is no longer an adversary, but a teacher. Integration is the next critical step. The Stoics do not separate life into compartments of pleasure and discipline. They understood that mastery over desire is inseparable from the mastery of the mind, body, and environment. Every prior part of this series contributes to a unified system. Awareness trains the mind to recognize impulses. Energy transmutation channels their intensity. Habit and environment design create structures that reinforce virtue. Emotional resilience ensures stability under stress. Social navigation maintains alignment within society. Long-term reinforcement compounds mastery over time. Integration is the act of harmonizing all these elements so that life itself becomes an extension of Stoic discipline. The individual no longer fights lust moment to moment. Life is designed such that impulses naturally flow into purpose rather than indulgence. Transcendence also involves identity redefinition. The man who has mastered lust consistently over years undergoes a profound transformation of self-perception. He is no longer reactive, he is proactive. Desire is acknowledged, understood, and redirected, not as a source of shame or guilt, but as a catalyst for growth. This identity solidifies through repeated practice, reflection, and success. It is not theoretical, it is lived. Each action, choice, and moment of restraint reinforce the person you have become, rational, disciplined, and free.
This identity becomes self-reinforcing. The more you embody it, the less external temptation can shake you. The Stoic understands that mastery is ultimately internal. The external world cannot enslave a man whose inner citadel is complete. The concept of transcendence also extends to vision and purpose. Lust often seeks immediate gratification at the expense of long-term goals. Mastery over it enables the individual to operate with foresight, patience, and clarity. Freed from impulsive indulgence, energy once wasted on fleeting pleasure is now invested in creation, achievement, and contribution. The Stoics viewed this as aligning human potential with nature, using one's rational faculties to elevate life and impact the world. Modern application includes channeling sexual energy into personal development, skill mastery, entrepreneurship, art, or intellectual growth. The same intensity that once threatened distraction now fuels ambition, innovation, and excellence. Integration is incomplete without the cultivation of perspective. Stoics like Marcus Aurelius emphasize the impermanence of all things, including physical pleasure. By internalizing this truth, lust loses its deceptive allure. Transcendence is achieved when desire is acknowledged but not elevated above reason, when the body's impulses serve the mind's purpose rather than dominate it. In this state, one experiences freedom from external distraction, internal chaos, and the tyranny of fleeting urges. Pleasure is no longer a master to pursue, but a natural consequence of disciplined living, experienced without compulsion, guilt, or loss of clarity. At this level of mastery, the Stoic experiences what can be described as energetic liberation. Every surge of desire that would have previously consumed attention is now a signal for redirection. The mind recognizes patterns, the body channels energy, and the spirit aligns with purpose. Life becomes a coherent flow rather than a series of battles. This is the essence of transcendence, the internalization of all previous practices to create a state where lust is present but powerless, where impulses exist but are harmonized, and energy is consciously and consistently directed toward growth, achievement, and virtue. The Stoics' transcendence also carries social and relational implications. Mastery over lust fosters clarity, integrity, and intentionality in interactions. Romantic and social relationships are approached with respect, mutual understanding, and purpose rather than impulsive craving. The ability to navigate human connection without being enslaved by desire enhances communication, strengthens trust, and fosters deeper relationships. Friends, partners, and colleagues perceive the individual as reliable, centered, and principled, a living example of self-mastery in action. In this way, transcendence over lust not only elevates personal life, but positively influences the social sphere. A critical element of this stage is continuous self-assessment. Transcendence is not a static achievement, it is dynamic. The Stoic maintains daily reflection, journaling, and evaluation of responses to impulses. Each encounter with desire, each surge of temptation, and each social interaction becomes an opportunity to refine mastery. This practice ensures that progress is reinforced, lessons are internalized, and identity remains aligned with principle. The mind becomes a living system of self-correction, perpetually maintaining balance, clarity, and focus. The final aspect of transcendence is the realization of freedom. Lust, once a dominating force, no longer dictates behavior. Energy is no longer fragmented by fleeting cravings, but unified under reason, purpose, and long-term objectives. The individual experiences a profound sense of sovereignty over attention, over action, over emotion, and ultimately over life itself. This is the Stoic ideal, living in accordance with nature and reason,
fully present, fully aware, and fully in control. Mastery over lust in this sense becomes a microcosm of mastery over all human impulses, demonstrating that freedom is not granted by circumstance, but earned through disciplined practice. In conclusion, Part 10 integrates all previous teachings into the ultimate stage of Stoic mastery: awareness, transmutation, habit and environment design, emotional resilience, social navigation, long-term reinforcement all converge to create a life in which lust is acknowledged, understood, and harmonized rather than resisted blindly. The Stoic achieves transcendence, a state where desire exists but does not dominate, where energy flows toward purpose rather than indulgence. The mind, body, and environment coalesce in disciplined alignment. This is freedom. This is sovereignty. This is the fulfillment of the Stoic path. The fight against lust transforms from a battle into a practice of life itself, a continuous refinement of self, energy, and focus that elevates every aspect of existence. As we conclude this journey, remember that mastery over lust is not a single victory, but a lifetime of practice. Each day, each choice, each moment of awareness compounds, building resilience, power, and freedom. Your impulses are not enemies, but instruments, raw energy waiting to be directed with reason and purpose. Apply the principles, cultivate the systems, reinforce the identity, and over time, desire itself becomes a tool, not a tyrant.